Hello guys, this is Paul McWhorter with TopTechBoy.com, and we're here today with lesson number 4 in our incredible new tutorial series where you're learning how to do 3D graphics and animations in Python. What I'm going to need you to do is pour yourself a nice strong cup of black coffee. That is straight up black coffee, no sugar, no sweeteners, none needed. That, my friend, is your goat juice. Go get you some. Okay, so I'm also going to need you to fire up your most excellent Visual Studio Code. And as you're doing that, as always, I want to give a shout out to you guys who are helping me out over at Patreon. It is your encouragement and your support that keeps this great content coming. You guys that are not helping out yet, look down in the description. There is a link over to my Patreon account. Think about hopping on over there and hooking a brother up. But enough of this shameless self-promotion. Let's jump in and talk about what we are going to learn today. We are going to look at the homework solution to the homework problem that I gave you in lesson number 3. And what that homework assignment was to adjust your parametric model for the room with the little marble bouncing around and get it where it properly bounces off the edge of the wall. Now, what I need to say is that lesson number 3 is going to be the most important thing that you learn in this whole series of lessons. If you are going to have any hope at all of doing complicated 3D animations and 3D graphics, you have to develop parameterized models. And that's where you don't just go in and say, well, this is at 5 and this is at 7 and this is 1 thick. And then you go in and you try to change something and it's hopelessly complicated. If you change the dimension of one thing, it puts the position of something else in the wrong place. And so you have to look at something like a room and you have to build a parameterized model. And then if you change any part of it, the other parts adjust so that you still have a room where the wall and the ceiling meet in the corner. And so if you don't understand that last lesson, go back and take it again, take it 2 or 3 times. It's just like you've got to understand it. And it's not just for animations. When you go in and start trying to do 3D design work, maybe for a 3D printer, or you start trying to use AutoCAD or Fusion 360 or any of those CAD packages, you have to do parametric design, parametric models. And so that's what last week's lesson was about. And you've really got to understand that and spend some time on it before you move on if you do not fully understand it. If you do not fully understand it, spend some time on that. Okay, what we are going to do is we're going to start where we left off last week, which was where we had a marble bouncing back and forth in the box. I want to make sure you guys can start exactly in the same place that I started. And so what you can do is, to make sure we're starting in the same place, you can go to the most excellent www.toptechboy.com and you can search in the friendly little search bar on Python 3D graphic lesson 3. You're parameterizing your 3D model. You'll come down here and you can click here and then right mouse click and copy, and you can get that code, and then you can come back to your most excellent Visual Studio Code, and then we are operating in let me do a little bit of maintenance here. Okay, let me make sure you can see this well. We are operating in the vpython folder, and we are going to create a new folder, which is, not a new folder, a new file, corrected parameter.py. So this is where we're going to correct our parameter model, and then we're going to click enter, and boom, we have a fresh new Python program just waiting to be written. Yes, sir. Okay, so we're going to come here and we're going to start where we left off last week. So we're going to paste that old code in here. And then, guys, even if you wrote it yourself, you might have kind of like named a few variables different than me. And so on this one, let's really start at the same starting point. And so let's come up here and run this thing and remind ourselves what it does. Okay, so what do? We like it that we have a little marble bouncing in a room. Okay, the room has everything matching up properly. It's properly dimensioned. And then if we come in and look at this, what do we not like? We don't like that the way that it's bouncing, okay? Because when we wrote this first simple-minded program, yes, we did parameters and we did it exactly right. That's the way you need to do it. You need to get all your parameters in place. But then when we get to that actual line of code where we are bouncing off of a wall, we just say the position of the marble is like X position, and that is the center of the marble. And then when we're talking about the position of the wall, it is the center of the wall. Okay, and so what was our condition for bounce when the center of the marble got to the center of the wall? When the center of the marble got to the center of the wall, I'm trying to make sure you can see it, that's when the bounce occurred. But in fact, what do you want? You want to bounce when the edge of the marble hits the edge of the wall. So our parameter model is correct, but we just need to change the condition at which we bounce. And if we're going to do that, guys, what I want to really show you is we are to the point in our programming where this is complicated enough you need to get it to work on paper before you try to get it to work in code. Because if you get it drawn up in paper, then it's really easy to code. If you just jump in and start coding, you're never going to understand what you're doing. And so I am going to try to kind of draw this up for you. And so what I am going to do, I'm going to try to get a little snazzy here and see if I am a little better on this. And so this is going to be, let's see if I can make it around. Yeah, okay. So that is going to be my marble. And let's say that that is the center of the marble right there. And then I'm going to draw two walls. And so I'm going to come over here and let's make it like that. Okay. And then let's come over here and draw another wall. Okay, and we will draw it like this. I think I did pretty good there, actually, even though I'm not really an expert. Even though I'm not an expert on the sketch pad, I think that is pretty good. Okay, so what we need to keep track of here, and I need to make sure that I go back to the pen. Okay, I think this should be the pen. We are tracking this right here, and what is that? That was X position. Okay, and then over here, this was kind of the center of the wall, and that's what we were tracking, was on the center of the wall. But what I really want is, I really want to know this, and I want to know this. So right now I'm comparing this to this, but what I really want to compare, and I think I am going to do a little cursor management here for you, and I think that would make you happy, because that that color is not going to show up well. Let's see if I kind of do something more like that. Okay, I think you can see that better with that background, so you can track my cursor a little bit better. Okay, so let's call this 1, okay, and then let's call this 2. All right, and so we're gonna, what is the position of 1 and what is the position of 2, just so I have time, I have room to write it. And that is starting to annoy me now even, and so let's see if I can change that a little bit. We're just kind of winging this thing on our, as we go here. I will make it more faint. What is that? That's what I want to make it more faint. Okay, I think that is less annoying, but I think that you can see it. All right, so now I need to call that point 1 something. Okay, so I am going to call it, I'm going to call it the X, because it is in the X direction, and then it is the right, X right marble edge. And I don't want to write out X right marble edge, so in the X direction it is the right side marble edge? Well, because we might do y later, and then we might also have x left marble edge, and then we might do something else. So I think that makes sense. So what is the x right marble edge? Well, if this is x position, that is going to be x position, but then it is going to be plus what? Half the diameter. Half the diameter is the radius, and what we got to recognize is that's already a parameter. Okay, that is m radius. And so this is going to be x position plus m radius. Okay, and notice that we are not going to have to divide radius by 2 because the radius is just the distance from there to there. So that is good. Now for number 2, what is number 2? That is the edge of the wall. And so what should we call that? That is right wall edge. Okay, right wall edge. And that's the only one that we're going to do. There's only one right wall and there's only one edge, and so that's going to be right wall edge. Now what is that going to be? Well, the distance between here and here, the distance between there and there is, what is our parameter? That would be room width. So the room width is the distance between the centers. And so the distance between there and there is room width. Okay, and let me make sure I'm using the same parameters. It is room width, and this was a small r, room width. Okay, so then the distance from here, the distance from here to here would be room width divided by 2. Now let's think about that. That is room width, the whole width. And then if I go from the center, over to here, that would be the room width divided by 2. And so what is this position? This position is room, and I'm going to get further out of your way. That position there is room width divided by 2. Then what is this position here? This is room width divided by 2 in the negative direction. Okay, and so now we know where those positions are. Okay, but I don't want this position, I want this position. Okay, and that's position 2. I want that position. Well, what would that be? That would be, I'm going to have to abbreviate room width divided by 2, okay, which is that, minus wall thickness divided by 2. And I'm sorry I'm not using the actual variable names here, but I just have to kind of abbreviate. So I'm going to have the room width divided by 2 is going to put me out here, and then I'm going to subtract the wall thickness divided by 2 because this is wall thickness here. So I've got to subtract half that. Okay, so that should be good. Now I'm going to need position 3, and then I'm also going to need position 4. So this is going to be position 3, and this is going to be position 4. And I'm going to take a second to erase a few of these things so that I have room here. Okay, I want to make sure that I'm leaving room. So this is position 3, and position 3 is just going to be the x value of the, and that's not right, x value of the left marble edge. X left marble edge is going to be x position, but this time it's what? It's minus m radius. Okay, so this position is x position minus the radius. So now I know where 3 is, And now what is 4 going to be? 4 is going to be the left wall edge, and it is going to be equal to, it's going to be equal to minus the room width divided by 2 minus room width over 2. So that is going to be minus room width over 2 would put us right here. But then I need plus what to get back over here? I need plus wall thickness divided by 2. Does that make sense? Guys, think about this and make sure that you understand it, because it's pretty clear when I draw it. I don't want the center of the marble to bounce when it's in the center of the wall. I want the marble to bounce when its right edge is against the left edge of the right wall. And when this position 1 equals position 2 is when I want to bounce, and when position 3 equals position 4 is when I want to bounce. And I think I have labeled these pretty clearly, right? I think I have labeled these pretty clearly. From here to here is the room width. Okay, this from here to here is half the room width. Okay, and so I go half the room width in the negative direction, and then I add half the wall thickness, and I get there to position 4. Guys, I am showing you how to think like an engineer. And what are you learning? You're learning you have to do things on paper before you do them in code. Now we're going to be switching back and forth between these views to kind of make this thing work. All right, so now what you got to see is I am not going to change my parameters, because my parameters are defined and they are correct and they work. What I have to do is I've got to come down here and change my conditions. I've got to change the conditions under which I bounce. Okay, now X position is still going to be X position, because I'm still going to be thinking about where the center of the ball is, right? What's the easiest way to keep track of the ball? The center of the ball. But I've got to define I have to define some new parameters. And so, like, what is one new parameter? Well, I need this X direction, the right marble edge, X right marble edge. I need to define that. Okay, so X right marble edge is going to be equal to what? X position plus, and then what was it? It was the M radius. This then, XRME. Now, unfortunately, you see how that lit up? It seems like that it is a reserved word, so I need to kind of do X right marble edge like that, because it was a reserved word. X right marble edge. And if I have X right marble edge, I need the X left marble edge, and this should have been X position here. This should have been X position. And now the X left marble edge is going to be what? X position minus M radius, right? And so let's go back and look at that. So this X left marble edge is the X position minus the radius. Okay, so that's pretty good. So I have those two positions. Now I need to get those two wall edges in my code, right? And so let's see here. We're going to come back over here, and that would be, let's go with the right wall edge. That's number 2 here, right wall edge. Well, that's the room width divided by 2 minus the wall thickness divided by 2. So room width divided by 2, room width divided by 2. And so what was that up here? Room width. So we're going to come down here, room width, or I'll go ahead, room width divided by 2, and then it was minus the wall thickness divided by 2. And so that was wall thickness divided by 2. Right, and now what were we going to call that? We were going to call that right wall edge. RWE, right wall edge. So the right wall edge is equal to, and that looks like a reserved word too, right wall edge is equal to that. And then we're also going to then have the left wall edge. And what was left wall edge? That was this position 4 here. And that is in the negative direction, so it's minus the room width divided by 2 would put you here, and then plus wall thickness divided by 2. So we're going to have minus room width divided by 2, and then we're going to have plus wall thickness divided by 2. Okay, now we've got these new parameters. We haven't changed X position. We're still keeping track of X position, okay, as far as the marble moving around. But now we're also keeping track of the position of the edge of the wall and the position of the left and right edge of the marble. So now what I'm going to say is, now I am not going to think like before it was when the marble gets over to that right wall and it's greater, the center of the marble is greater than the center of the right wall. No, what we're going to do now is we want that right edge. So X marble, X, what was that? X R M E. I forgot what the R is. X, X right marble edge. So when the right of the marble edge is greater than what? Well, it's the position of the right wall edge. And we're going to say greater than or equal to. So if the right edge of the marble is greater than or equal to the right wall edge, we want to change direction. And then also on the other side, we would be looking at the X left marble edge, and if that gets less than, the left wall edge, we want to change direction. And notice that I didn't make left wall edge negative because it's already made negative up here. And so go back and look at the picture if it doesn't make sense. Okay, so now this is kind of interesting. I think that probably I would bet in here somewhere I probably made a typo, but let's go ahead and let's try to run this. Suspense builds, suspense builds. Boom! Did you see that? All right, now is it going to work on the other side? Let's look. Let's look. Boom! Who's your huckleberry? I'm your huckleberry. I've shown you how to do parameterized models, and now everything's working. And this wasn't that hard. Number one, you start with a parameterized model. Number two, then when you have quirky little things like the ball going into the wall, you make some new parameters based on those other parameters. You see, I didn't define a completely new parameter. I just made that edge of the marble reference to the center of the marble. So I haven't changed any dimensions. I've just added new positions within the parameter set that I had. Look at that. Now, here's going to be the full test. I might have made myself your huckleberry a little bit too soon, because as coders, we really need to do a better job of really checking for a lot of different conditions. And I think one way we could really check this is, what if we make the wall thickness 1, and let's say we make this a little bigger, like 15, and we make this a little bigger, like 15. And then let's say I want to do these different though, so that we really are checking it out. And then let's say the room height is 8, and then we're 15 by 12, and then let's make the marble 2. So you see, we're really changing things up. And so this is going to be a pretty big marble and pretty thick walls, but let's see if it still works right. Well, you know, by really coming up with these weird things, we're going to see if our parameters are really set up. All right, hold your breath. Wow. Okay, let's look over here. Okay, I couldn't quite see exactly there. The room is certainly looking good. Now, this is the moment of truth. Shazam! Did you see that? Did you see that? Let's look at that. Boom. Okay, and you got to look really, really carefully, and sometimes it's kind of hard to tell exactly. No, that was perfect. Shazam. Did you see that? Wow. Now, is this pretty cool or what? You guys leave me some comments down below. Are you grasping what I'm telling you? Are you grasping the importance of having a good parameterized model? So what have you learned? The first thing that you learned is in the last lesson, you define things that really make sense. Like you've got a radius of a marble. That physically makes sense. Then you have physical walls. They have some wall thickness. You have a width of the room. You have a depth of the room, and you have a height of the room. Okay, now notice I did not make a parameter of the position of the wall. Why did I not make a parameter of the position of the wall? Because the position of the wall needs to be at the edge of the ceiling. Okay, and if I made a separate parameter for the position of the wall, I could change the dimension of the ceiling. Let's say I went from here to here, and what would happen, the wall would be here, and when I change the position, or the wall would be here, and when I change the size of the ceiling, they don't match anymore. So when we did this parameterized model, the position of the wall is at the edge of the ceiling. So when you change the ceiling width, it changes the wall position. So you see, you've got to understand which parameters depend on other parameters. Because if I'd made independent parameters for the positions of the walls and the positions of the ceilings, then when I change one of the other parameters, the room breaks. But you see, I never made the position of the walls or the ceilings a parameter. They were based on the position was based on the height of the room, right? You see, the position of the floor is based on the height of the room. And that way, when I change the height of the room, my floor is in the right place. Guys, go back and watch the last lesson and this lesson again. So at this point, we have a good parameterized model. And then what we did was we said, okay, it's all good. All the parameters of the model are good. But what we need to do is we need to not just keep track of the X position, the center of the ball, but the edge position of the center of the ball. Okay, that was not a new parameter. That was just the old parameter X position plus the old parameter radius of the ball. Okay, and then we define this not as a new parameter, but in terms of the other parameters, which was the width of the room divided by 2 minus half the thickness of the wall. So you see, the new parameters are based on the old ones, and you've got to not introduce more parameters where you end up breaking things. I hope this makes sense. Man, this was kind of fun. I actually love this stuff. And once you kind of start understanding it, it's fun. And if you can do this, then you can actually go in and start doing 3D modeling in something like Fusion 360 or AutoCAD, and you can start building models that then you could go 3D print or something like that. So I am really, really hoping that this made sense for you guys. Okay, so I'm going to give you a homework for next week. Okay, you see this ball bouncing back and forth? What your homework for next week is to have it moving in 3 different dimensions. And so it's not just going back and forth in X, it's going back and forth in Y, and it's going back and forth in Z, all at the same time. Okay, so each time through the loop, you're going to have a new X position, a new Y position, and a new Z position. And so what you got to see is it's not just going like this or like this or like this. Each step, it is going to go over a little bit in X, over a little bit in Y, and over a little bit in Z. And then if it hits the ceiling, it's got to bounce. If it hits the back wall, it's got to bounce. If it hits the floor, it's got to bounce. If it hits the left wall, it's got to bounce. If it hits the right wall, it has to bounce. Okay, now imagine you're going to have an imaginary front wall. Even though you can't see it, you're going to have an imaginary front wall. So when it comes out to the front here, you don't want it to jailbreak, you want it to bounce bounce back in, but we're not physically putting the wall there so that we can watch the ball. Okay, does this make sense? You guys should be able to figure this out. So you guys leave me a note down below and say I am legend if you're able to get it done, or I fold it up like a cheap lawn chair, like a cheap Walmart lawn chair. Okay, but guys, really, some of this stuff, it's so simple when you watch me do it, but it's kind of hard to see it the first time. And if you just watch me do it, you're going to think, oh, that's easy, I understand it, where you don't appreciate what it takes to figure this stuff out. So before you see me do it, you need to spend at least an hour or so in the next week just banging your head against the wall trying to get it to work. Okay, and then you guys even like, man, take a screenshot of your thing working and, you know, post a little YouTube video and put the little link to your video over in the description down below so other people can see that you're really getting this stuff done. Okay, man, I'm having a lot of fun with this, and what I'm going to do now is I am going to go work on next week's lesson, and I hope you guys will go work on it too. And a little bit about where we're going on this, we're going to kind of learn more and more about how to do animations and simulations in 3D like we're doing here. And then what we're going to do at some point is we're going to tie this up to Arduino, and what things do on the screen depends on what's happening with your Arduino and, you know, sensors and things like that making things happen, or also visual Python making things happen in the Arduino. So we're going to start linking up, we're going to start linking our 3D models to the real world through Arduino, and that is going to be pretty darn cool. Okay guys, I hope you're having as much fun with this as I am. If you like the video, give me a thumbs up. That really helps me with the old YouTube algorithms. And then also, if you haven't subscribed to the channel already, make sure to hit that subscribe button, ring the bell so you'll get notifications when my future lessons come out. And then think about sharing this on social media, because we need more people in the world that know how to code and are sitting doing something useful like coding, and fewer people sitting around watching silly cat videos. This is Paul McWhorter from TopTechBoy.com. I will talk to you guys later.